How did a small island nation come to rule a quarter of the world? This is the story of the British Empire, a tale of ambition, conquest, and profound global change. Let's travel back in time to where it all began. Our journey starts in the late 16th and early 17th centuries. England, a relatively minor European power, began to look outwards. Ambitious merchants and explorers set up trading posts across the globe, from the spice-rich islands of the East Indies to the shores of North America. These weren't grand conquests just yet, but small, vital footholds driven by the pursuit of wealth. Soon, these trading posts grew into something much bigger: colonies. In North America, settlements like Jamestown and Plymouth were founded. Some came for profit, seeking to grow valuable crops like tobacco and sugar. Others, like the Pilgrims, sought religious freedom, a chance to build a new society far from the conflicts of Europe. The Caribbean also became a hub of activity, with islands like Barbados and Jamaica transformed into hugely profitable sugar plantations, worked by enslaved Africans under brutal conditions. This network of trade and settlement across the Atlantic became known as the First British Empire. It was a maritime empire, connected by ships and dependent on naval power. But this first chapter was about to come to a dramatic close. By the mid-18th century, the 13 colonies in North America were thriving, but tensions with Britain were rising. Colonists felt their rights were being ignored, especially when it came to taxes imposed without their consent. No taxation without representation became their rallying cry. The American Revolutionary War erupted, and against all odds, the colonists, with French help, won their independence. The loss of its most populous and developed colonies in 1783 was a stunning blow to Britain, marking the end of this first imperial phase. Many thought this was the end of Britain's imperial ambitions. They were wrong. It was just the beginning of a new, even larger empire. Stung by the loss of America, Britain turned its gaze eastward. This pivot marked the beginning of the Second British Empire. The focus shifted dramatically towards Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. The 19th century would witness an unprecedented expansion, fueled by the Industrial Revolution, which gave Britain a massive technological and economic advantage. Its factories demanded raw materials, and its growing population provided a market for goods. At the heart of this eastern expansion was India. The British East India Company, a private corporation, had been trading in India since the early 1600s. Over 2 centuries, it transformed from a commercial enterprise into a powerful political and military force. It played Indian rulers against each other, raised its own private armies, and gradually took control of vast swathes of the subcontinent. The wealth extracted from India, from textiles to tea, flowed back to Britain, funding its industrial growth and further imperial ventures. The turning point came in 1857 with the Indian Rebellion. What started as a mutiny among Indian soldiers in the company's army quickly spread into a widespread uprising against British rule. The rebellion was suppressed with immense brutality, and it had a profound consequence. The British government decided the East India Company could no longer be trusted to manage such a vital territory. In 1858, the company was dissolved, and India came under the direct rule of the British Crown. Queen Victoria was later proclaimed Empress of India, cementing the subcontinent's status as the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. While India was being brought under direct rule, a new imperial race was beginning elsewhere. In the late 19th century, European powers engaged in what became known as the Scramble for Africa. Driven by economic interests, strategic rivalries, and a sense of racial superiority, they carved up the entire continent among themselves in just a few decades. Britain was a leading player in this scramble. From Egypt in the north, with its vital Suez Canal, down to the resource-rich lands of South Africa, Britain established a vast network of colonies. Territories like Nigeria, Kenya, and Rhodesia were created, often with arbitrary borders that ignored existing ethnic and cultural groups, sowing the seeds for future conflicts. The goal was to secure resources, create new markets, and prevent rivals like France and Germany from gaining an advantage. By the dawn of the 20th century, the British Empire had reached its zenith. It was the largest empire in human history. From the snowy expanses of Canada to the vast deserts of Australia, from the bustling ports of Hong Kong and Singapore to tiny islands in the Pacific, the Union Jack flew over an astonishing range of territories. At its peak, the empire covered nearly a quarter of the world's land area and governed roughly a quarter of its population, around 450 million people. This vast global network gave rise to the famous phrase, "The empire on which the sun never sets," and it was literally true. At any given moment, somewhere in the British Empire, the sun was shining. A powerful map graphic from the time would show the world painted in imperial red, a visual testament to its staggering scale. This global reach was maintained by the Royal Navy, the most powerful naval force in the world, which policed the sea lanes and connected the disparate parts of the empire. London was the financial capital of the world, and English was becoming a global language of commerce and administration. For many in Britain, the empire was a source of immense national pride, a symbol of their nation's power and civilizing mission. However, this golden age was built on a foundation that was beginning to crack. The immense cost of maintaining such a vast empire was starting to show. More importantly, the seeds of nationalism and independence movements were being sown in the colonies. People under British rule began to demand the same rights and self-determination that the British themselves enjoyed. The beginning of the end came with the two world wars. In both conflicts, the empire was a crucial asset for Britain. Millions of soldiers from India, Africa, Canada, Australia, and beyond fought and died for the British cause. But the wars were devastating. Britain was left economically exhausted and militarily overstretched. The wars shattered the myth of European invincibility and weakened Britain's grip on its colonies. The promises of freedom and democracy that had been used to rally support during the wars now echoed back, as colonized peoples demanded those same freedoms for themselves. The process of decolonization began in earnest after World War II. The first major step was the independence of India and Pakistan in 1947, a momentous but also violent event marked by the partition of the subcontinent. This triggered a domino effect. Over the next 2 decades, a wave of independence movements swept across the empire. Britain, weakened and facing pressure from both the United States and the Soviet Union, had little choice but to grant independence. The wind of change, as British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan called it, blew through Africa in the 1960s, leading to the creation of dozens of new nations. By the late 20th century, only a few scattered overseas territories remained. The handover of Hong Kong to China in 1997 is often seen as the final, symbolic end of the British Empire. So what is the legacy of this vast, complex empire? It's a legacy of contradictions. On one hand, the empire left behind systems of law, administration, and education in many parts of the world. It spread the English language, which is now the dominant global language of communication. It created infrastructure like railways and ports, although often to serve its own economic interests. On the other hand, the legacy is also one of exploitation, violence, and inequality. Imperial rule often destroyed local industries, imposed artificial borders that fueled ethnic conflicts, and was built on racist ideologies. The economic and social scars of colonialism are still visible in many former colonies today. Understanding the British Empire is not about simple celebration or condemnation. It is about grappling with a complicated history that has profoundly shaped the world we all live in today. Its rise and fall is a powerful reminder of how empires are built, how they function, and how, inevitably, they come to an end, leaving behind a legacy that continues to influence us all. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey through history interesting, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the past. See you next time.